evening, everyone, and welcome to the Daily BALM. This is a regular podcast kind of gathering where we talk about the 12 principles and relevant recovery topics. This week, we're looking at Principle 7, don't set a boundary unless you're determined to stick to it. Our guest this evening is KL Wells. And KL has a lot of experience with this topic. In fact, she's even written a book about it. We'll talk about her book tonight. There we
are.
Of Courage, From Crisis to Thriving. Okay. KL is a community leader with 35 plus years of leadership, an emotional fitness trainer, an influential TEDx speaker, and the mom of a young man in recovery. Her life changed course after witnessing her son's experience with drug addiction. During this time, she sought to find support and answers, but couldn't find a resource that had all she needed in one place. So she founded Voices InCourage, a safe community for families of persons struggling with addiction so they can strive in the midst of chaos. KL has built an executive coaching and consulting business that has collaborated with hundreds of nonprofit organizations and companies by effectively leading initiatives with CEOs, senior executives, board directors, trustees, and philanthropists that have attracted hundreds of millions of dollars to ignite organizational and community-wide change. Today, she spends hundreds of hours annually facilitating powerful, productive conversations and help her clients grow as powerful leaders creating successful companies. Most recently, she's focused much of her time hosting and growing her powerful Voices InCourage podcast and authored her latest book, The 5 Acts of Courage, From Crisis to Thriving. Welcome, KL.
Thank you. I'm always amazed when I hear my own bio. Isn't that weird? Yeah. I mean, I've lived, decades of a life and have packed it. And so, yes, there I am.
Doing a lot of good in the world. KL, in your book, The 5 Acts of Courage, From Crisis to Thriving, you begin with a letter to your readers that says, sometimes life just falls apart in order for it all to genuinely fall together. Talk about that line, how it was true for you and how you think it can help other families impacted by a loved one's addiction.
Well, how I think about it is that embedded in our greatest pains are also the rising of our own story and consciousness and opportunities to serve at a higher level. And so this has, been decades in the making. And in the 90s and doing some very deep personal development work, I was introduced to that notion. And I grabbed a hold of it and I continued to work with it in the years to come. And so when I stood on that sidewalk in 2018 and witnessed my son's arrest, which was hugely traumatic, even in that moment, I really knew that as deeply as I felt like everything was falling out from under me, and literally dropped to my knees when I got back up to the hotel room, dissolved in heartbreak, I also intuitively knew that it was going to be a moment for my life to actually begin to fall together, because I felt called to a higher level of consciousness and understanding of not only my son's disease and his journey, but also mine. And so in that moment, and the moments that have transpired since, I've continued to reach for learning and stretching and growing and becoming the newest version of myself on a very consistent basis. And we all know, the average for treatment is 5 to 6 times. Well, Sam took 12. And so in the midst of the highs and lows with all of that, I knew each time when it got more what I would consider severe, that I needed to reach higher in terms of who I was as his mom and who I was going to be in the moment. And I intuitively knew, because I am the daughter of a prescription addict and the sister of a cocaine addict, that I could see who my son truly was. And yet it was wrapped in a package of substance use disorder that was destroying him. And so learning how to love him in his disease, love myself in the midst of this chaos and disruption, those were aspirations that I held. And that's why, in the book, I grabbed a hold of that framework from the National Firefighters Association of crisis to thriving, because I have a great life. I have a great marriage. I love the work that I do. And, I backpack and I hike and, all of these things. I was not, and absolutely, it was non-negotiable that Sam's disease was going to get the power to take my life out too.
So are you saying you realized that the whole time, or you came to realize that at a certain point?
It is a notion that I have worked with that got amplified and accelerated in the midst of this disease with Sam. And now I want to be really clear with your audience that it doesn't mean that I haven't had these moments of absolute, complete falling apart. And the difference is that I allowed myself the gift of falling apart, of feeling the emotions. I wasn't just going to get stuck in them.
Right.
And that I was going to rise. I was going to move through and rise. And that the experiences that I've been through, the highs and the lows, are about an elevation of skilling for myself personally and evolving, continuing to evolve. My timeframes for turnaround are so much tighter now. Whereas, some people say, well, I was out of it for a week, or I was out of it for a month, or I don't have those. And quite frankly, when people say I've had a bad day, I'm like, really, you had a completely bad day? Like, you gave the whole day a bad day? Because I think more and more we have these moments. And if we can reframe or even entertain the notion that this is a moment, it will pass, we can rise, we can be better, we can show up not only for ourselves, but we can show up for others. And we can certainly show up for those that we love that are dealing with substance use disorder in love and compassion and kindness with boundaries.
Absolutely. This idea of a completely bad day. A couple of days ago, I lost my dog, my companion, 16 years. And it's a dog, I understand, but this was a member of my family. And I have been very sad. And in the middle of that sadness, I've had some really fun moments with my husband, with my daughter, with my with my friends in my area. But there's this sense of sad.
Right.
If I settle down for a little bit, the sad comes up and I sit with it. I allow it. What do you say about that?
Well, what I say is sad doesn't mean you had a bad day. Okay. I think sad is an expression of deep love. You can't love deeply and not experience sadness or grief along the way. And so I don't frame sad, or I don't frame a lot of things as, quote, bad or wrong. It just is. And so when people label things as I had a bad day, then they kind of take out any joy that they might have experienced. They take out any possibility of laughter or being present in your day. Instead, you've given the day, it almost got hijacked into the past, maybe the future. And so I think there's a lot to work with from that perspective.
So you put together this roadmap. Maybe you got it from the firefighters, but you adapted it to this topic. Could you share that with us?
Well, I sat down and I thought about, I wanted to capture what it was that I cobbled together over about a 5-year period of time without knowing BALM existed. And because it was a roadmap that worked for me. And in the journey of trying to figure out, okay, how do I language this? How do I exemplify this? One of the things that came up was the Firefighters Association framework: crisis, struggling, surviving, and thriving. I had known that thriving was the aspiration that I held, but I didn't have the descriptors for all 4 of those areas. And so when I found it, I was like, this is brilliant, because it gives descriptors for people to identify where are they in this framework. And I use it quite often with my executives as they go through various things for them to identify, and then also identify, okay, if I could take one thing if I'm in crisis, which a lot of people, sleep is an issue. If I could take sleep as one thing and I could move it down the spectrum and the framework to I'm able to sleep for the most part well at night, which for me, sleep is mission critical. It is, scientifically one of the massive foundations of our health. I can help people move in that direction where they can get that foundation back in place. And this framework really helps from that perspective. So
talk a little bit, take a stage and take us through it.
So I think for a lot of people, they certainly deal with crisis, which means I don't know if I can survive this. And I will say, the moment that I witnessed my son's arrest, there was a thought that went through my head, I don't know if I can survive this. And so that looks like potentially panic attack, nightmares, flashbacks, and inability to sleep because you're just running the scenario over and over and over in your head. And so that required me to do what I would call pattern interrupt. So I didn't give it the power to run over and over and over. Like you're almost grinding it in like a CD. That is so not helpful. Then you have these intrusive thoughts. You could be doing something, you could be laughing, you could be having a great time, and then a thought goes through your head of that, like that moment, or he could die, or she could die. I mean, lots of times we're dealing with obviously life or death situations, and that particular intrusive thought can be present quite often. I mean, worst case scenario, you actually believe you're not going to be able to survive this, and potentially you lean into some self-harm things. People start drinking, they start doing drugs, they may be cutting, they may have suicidal ideations, those kinds of things, which are more on the spectrum. A lot of anger, enraged. Why are they doing this to me? And why can't they see this is killing me, or they're killing themselves? When we are in that place, we're in our brainstem, which is the fight, flight, or freeze place. And so if we have any decisions to make, we better be really careful about those decisions, because out of that space of fight, flight, or freeze, we're usually significantly hampered in the quality of the decisions that we make. We may feel numb, lost, out of control. We may be so devastated we pull back relationships that will support us, hold us, love us. I think those are the major things.
Yeah. And then, so you move from crisis into struggling. We would call that pre-shift into shift in progress.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it. And so what struggling looks like is you're like working to get them fixed. As an example, your whole being is about getting them in treatment, doing whatever you can to convince them, cajole them, yell at them to make all that happen. And then you finally hit this point where I can't keep this up. Like you're giving your life force energy completely away to something that you think you can control and you have no control over it. And so that can look like sadness, hopelessness, complete exhaustion. If you're working, poor performance at work, really, really poor decisions. Again, you kind of run through I'm tired, I'm achy, I have pains in my body, because you're holding that energy in your body. I mean, it will show up in all different kinds of configurations. You may get sick, restlessness, disturbed sleep, those kinds of things show up in that particular category.
And then how does one move from crisis to struggling into surviving?
So again, like I said, with my clients, I show them this framework, ask them to identify where they are. And then I simply ask them, are you open to shifting? And if so, what's one thing on this list that's getting in your way the most that you would like to shift? I just have them pick one, because the way that I think about it is we're like a tapestry. You pick one, that you pull that thread, it's going to affect all the rest of the threads.
Right.
So I want them to be at choice in this, because it's their choice. So then they choose what they want to work on. And then we look at the framework and look at, okay, what do they believe that they could change and begin to move towards in that one area? And they're willing to take it on. There's a commitment level of, 8 or higher on a scale of 1 to 10. And then we map through, okay, what are 1 or 2 things that you can start to embed tomorrow that are habits that are going to be created anew. And then I also talked to them about habit change and how that works in our brains. So they're more aware of, look, your brain's going to try and keep you safe, which means keeping the same habits you've had.
Right. So it's interesting as I look at the roadmap, you're in crisis and then you're struggling. And at a certain point, you start to survive, or is it more like crisis, struggle, and surviving are one thing? Because they seem very similar.
They are similar. There are distinctions between them. There's a difference between I can't survive this and I can't keep this up. That's how I think about it. And then something isn't right is different than those two also. I have clients. I had a client last week that I met with who identified, I'm in all three of the front of these: crisis, struggling, surviving. And I was like, okay.
Yeah.
So what's the one that's getting in your way the most? Let's start there. And if you look at thriving, can you even begin to entertain the notion of the corresponding statement that's in thriving? Because I do think, in some respects, this is bold work. This is for some people, this is like mind-bending work.
Right.
And so
the way that we do it in the BALM is, it's like, as people go through the principles, they go through a shift as they get educated and work with their coach. So we call it pre-shift, where they're just, completely discombobulated, and they begin to get education and they start to make progress towards what we call being in action and finally being in strong, positive relationship. And the transformation is essential, but it does take deep work, a lot of education.
Yeah, absolutely. My career has been built off of, I'm an avid learner. So I'm constantly gathering. And, in 50 years of gathering, I have a lot of resources. And because I think strategically, I am always constantly looking for what's the thing I can grab a hold of or help my clients grab a hold of that's going to move the needle the most. And so, like, if I had known, back when that the BALM existed, I would have absolutely grabbed this program, because my interpretation and perception of it is it would have helped me move the needle in a compressed period of time versus what I saw was available out there.
Right. That's why we call it a fast track.
Exactly.
Really does. So when people get to thriving, how do you see that shift coming about? Do you visibly notice it in your clients?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. I have one client, gentleman, very successful in the contracting business. The first 6 months that he came to me, and I met with him twice a month, he cried every single time. And so my gauge was, how far can we get into our time together before he starts crying? And then it became, wow, he didn't cry until, we're like 45 minutes in, or he didn't cry. And so his emotionality was my clue that I could see the progress taking place.
Right. And you talk about the importance of feeling emotions and the relationship of the brain to emotions. Could you talk about that?
Let me, do you have that slide? No. Okay.
I thought
Do you want me to show it?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So this slide was super helpful. I'm a big reader, and this comes from Permission to Feel by Dr. Mark Brackett. And, the average American can identify 3 emotions: happy, sad, and angry. So I use this a lot with my clients. And in my executive practice, I use this a lot too, for them to identify where they are. If you take this quad and turn it on its side with the red and blue parts down, it represents brainstem, when you're in fight, flight, or freeze. And so the upper part is neocortex when you're in what I call sage. And sage represents thriving, which means you're in confidence, you're in clarity, you're in creativity, you're in possibilities. You are awake and present to be able to make much better decisions, and you are in charge of the power of your life. And so that's how I think about this in relation to the brain and understanding what's happening here. So I asked them, identify kind of where you are right now. And again, are you open to making the shift? So shifting from here to here. And there's a few techniques that are super quick in making those shifts. One is brainstem can't count. So when people talk about doing a breathing like a 4x4x8, like we've talked about. Make sure you're counting, because this part can't count. So it automatically flips you up here. That's one. From a vibrational perspective, play really uplifting, inspiring, aspirational music. You just need a minute and it will shift you out of here to up here. If you need to take a walk around, get outside and breathe in nature, that's another shift. But one of the most powerful things is shift to gratitude. No matter what is going on, honestly, and I have done this consistently, I have automatically shifted to, because I know what worked in my brain and for me. And then I go to gratitude and I start ticking off, listing through what I'm most grateful for. And I can show you what the benefits are of gratitude if you want me to.
Oh, yeah, that'd be wonderful.
Okay, so let's do that.
Very much into gratitude here.
So unfortunately, this is what it looks like. But oh, wait a minute. Yeah, so we'll just go with this. So you can see over here the physical benefits, then the psychological benefits, and then the social benefits. So gratitude has so much of a big import in affecting us that I don't think most people realize. But from a physical perspective, you can see it strengthens our immune system. It lessens our aches and pains. It lowers our blood pressure. We're more inclined to get out and exercise more and take better care of our health. We sleep better. And then we have more positive emotions. We're more alert, alive, awake. We can feel joy, pleasure, optimism, happiness. And then socially, we want to be engaged. And so that engagement, I think we'll get to in a little bit in terms of what our community, a community that will keep us in a thriving place, what that looks like and sounds like and feels like. But those are 4 techniques to help shift from this side of the brainstem to up here. Like my clients, I do this all the time. Because I want them to remember they're taking their power back from their brain.
Right.
Because we're habit machines. We have habits of thinking, we have habits of emotion, and we have habits of behavior. And what we're doing is countercultural to the habits that generally we've created since childhood. So we're rewiring our neural pathways.
We are creating a new culture within ourselves.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
So you talk about the importance of self-care, and you mentioned 4 happiness chemicals and how to hack them. Could you talk about that?
So here's one of the slides that's in the book is, I think it's really important to understand that we play a role from a chemical perspective. So not only is sleep mission critical, exercise mission critical, and exercise plays a role in our ability to hack into the happiness chemicals. You can see, exercise is in the serotonin mood stabilizer place, but also what we eat. And so from a dopamine perspective, it's like if you set out to do something like a task and you get it done, you feel good. Self-care activities, you feel good. I say when it says eating food, I mean eating clean, whole, healthy food, because what we eat significantly impacts how we feel. And so when I met with a client last week, I said, "Are you drinking?" And she said, "A little bit." And I said, "Stop," because she's in crisis. So I said, "You have to stop drinking." And I said, "What about your sugar intake?" Blah, blah, blah. So we just kind of ticked through some of the nutritional things that will help her body, which will help her mental state and help her thriving state. And then you go over here, animals are fantastic because they just love unconditionally. And so being around that kind of can't wait to see you, love you kind of energy is just so awesome. And so like around 9/11, there was a building that people were in. It wasn't a building that was going down, but it was in the vicinity. And somebody brought a baby in. And everybody's energy changed from fear and massive anxiety and all the things. They instantly changed to, "Oh," and just being present with baby energy is just so awesome. So hugging a friend, hugs are really super valuable. Now I do what we call a heart hug. You know what that is?
Talk about it. I do.
Okay, so a heart hug is heart to heart. So it's the opposite of the normal hug that we do. And when you do a heart-to-heart hug, and if you hold it for 30 seconds, everything shifts in a super positive way. And so I have execs that I do retreats with that we will do heart hugs for 30 seconds. And obviously, the first time they do it, 30 seconds seems like ever. But then they get accustomed to it. And then pretty soon, like I run mastermind groups, they are routinely giving each other heart hugs when they see each other now. Giving somebody else a compliment because it gets you out of yourself. Recognizing something great in somebody else to give them a compliment about makes you feel good, makes them feel good, makes you feel good. It's just a reciprocal experience. Walking in nature, sun exposure, that is just a mission critical thing like almost every day. And Florida, you get a lot more sun than we do in the Pacific Northwest.
Yes.
So some people do need to supplement with light therapy, but what I'm really keen about is get out and move. Get outside and move. Nature is incredibly restorative. That's why backpacking for me is non-negotiable. I love getting out, being away from everything else, being super present, and I can feel the weight of the things that I pick up dropping away behind me, like an energetic debris almost. So, and then laughter. If you don't have a laughing buddy, find one, because laughter is just so restorative and it's fantastic. Essential oils, you can go to a shop and ask. They can create them for you that will help create the energy through the oils that will serve you at a much higher level. Watch a comedy. I watch a lot of comedies. I love to laugh. And also listening to great music that lifts you up aspirationally. And then obviously dark chocolate and exercising. So this is a kind of a thing that is, I think, again, mission critical to pick 1, 2, 3, 4, pick one out of each of these areas. So you are taking care of yourself at a much higher level than what happens most of the time. So these are ways that you can begin to take your power back. So you are present for whatever is happening in your life and on your journey, as well as the person that you love who's dealing with substance use disorder.
Right. It's beautiful. And if you haven't got this book yet, I wish I could show this more clearly. There we go. You can see that the pages she's describing are laid out for you. I love this book.
Thank you.
I really recommend it. I highly recommend it.
Thank you.
I hope you'll pick up a copy because everything we're talking about, KL goes into detail and really explains. And it's like a little workbook. You can, so, you're having a rough day. There are those happiness hacks, right? Beautiful. So, in the Balm, we're really into community. And
yes.
Too. So yes. Why is it so important to build a powerful community?
Well, I mean, in the business world, it's just a known thing that, who you surround yourself with is who you become. And so when you're in crisis, who you have picked to surround yourself with matters more than anything else, is because if you have 1, 2, 3 people that are going to hold the space and love you in the midst of this crisis, just listen to you, be present for you, bring absolutely zero judgment to the equation. Stigma is gone, shame is gone. You have a shame-free environment, friends that love you. You are way ahead of the game because the statistics are that 95% of our success is directly determined by the community that we surround ourselves with. So I'm very high on, like who I surround myself with. I have been for years from a business perspective, and then it got amplified going through this experience with Sam.
Beautiful. And what communities have you made use of over the years?
Well, I have 3 different communities that are super valuable for me. One is I do run a mastermind, and although I quote run it, I need it just as much as they do. And we have a very vulnerable, we can tell whatever we need to tell in that room. Although all of us are CEOs and run big companies and so on and so forth, it doesn't matter. So having that as a place to support me, I mean, the morning that I found out that my son was at his bottom relative to fentanyl addiction, I could not get a hold of him. And I ran that meeting that morning. And the first thing I said to them when we were all convened was, I'm very fragile right now. I didn't say I'm fragile today. I said, I'm fragile right now. And even as I said that to them, I could feel the fragility pulling away from me. And so that's the kind of community you want. I have a great friend group. They'd been through a lot with me. And then I actually did a 9-month Vision Quest process, Native American Indigenous process. And that particular group, they are still some of my closest friends today, which is now 6 years later. And they were with me when the TED Talk got birthed, which it took 5 years to get to the stage. And so they're the ones that held me in some of the roughest moments where I could just lay it out and ugly cry. And so I wasn't in that group when I witnessed Sam's arrest. 2 months later, I was in that group.
So what I'm hearing you say is you've not only had these thoughts that have put this book together, you've lived everything that you're sharing with others. It makes a big difference.
Oh, absolutely. I'm a big proponent. And look, if I can't walk this walk, then I don't have any business teaching it. And so if I can't teach it, then I'm going to find somebody who can. But everything in that book is things I do. It is my expression of how I moved from crisis to thriving and the things that I do on a routine basis in order to maintain a high level of performance and joy and happiness in my life, no matter what's happening with my son.
Right. He's on his journey.
He's on his journey.
And you're
Yeah. And I think it's important to recognize that I think about God or spirit or whatever. I don't begin to know what Sam's purpose is while he's here, nor does anybody else know what mine is. I believe I am in living my purpose right now, which is part of, what we're talking about here. That book was birthed out of my purpose. The things that I talk and train and coach on birthed out of my purpose. But I needed to get really, really clear that loving Sam through his unfolding, not knowing what that unfolding was going to be, it could have been so far. He is still alive and in recovery at this point, but it could have meant that he was going to pass. And I was very clear that if in fact that did transpire, that his life would not be in vain, that it was going to serve a larger purpose through me.
You talk about the importance of being open to changing your beliefs. What beliefs did you have to change in order to get to that understanding?
Oh, geez. Well, I think the first thing that pops in my mind is, the mommy code, that we're supposed to fix it. We're supposed to keep them safe. We're supposed to,
Right. We're as happy as our saddest child.
So I had to wrestle with that belief to the point where, I just sliced it up and threw it away and burned it, and began to believe that the only thing I can control is me, my thoughts, my beliefs, my walk in this world, who I choose to be in it, who I choose to be in moments, what I read, who I surround myself with. Those are all the things that I can control. And I had absolutely no control over Sam's journey other than to be clear with him that he was loved no matter what, and do the things that I felt were loving in the midst of all of this, which I had to wrestle with my own kind of demon around the request for money. And that was one of the boundaries that was hard for me to get to, because in fact, there was a moment where I was so desperate just to do something for him that hitting Cash App send was my hit to feel like I was doing something. And when I realized that, I was done. I was blunt.
It's really, when we're enabling, it's really about us. It's not about them.
Absolutely. Yes. And
we're helping to kill them.
Yes. But it's not an intellectual thing. It is a heart-centered shift that needs to take place. And so it's almost like a full body experience of getting super clear. Oh, that's my addiction. Oh, okay, we're not doing that anymore. I'm taking my power back. And then a couple other things is really truly believing that no matter what happens, there are always gifts and lessons embedded in the experience. And so to be able to shift from what we normally ask, and it's been my experience too, is why is this happening? Which is a completely unanswerable question. So it leads us down a rabbit hole of despair because we can't answer the question.
Or how could this happen to me?
How could this happen to me? How can they do this to me? All of those kinds of things. And to recognize that and flip it to, okay, what are the gifts and lessons embedded in this experience for me? Yeah. And really lean into that consistently. And then gifts and lessons will pop up, So the day that I witnessed my son's arrest, one of the gifts that popped up that day back up in the hotel room was my spouse absolutely took care of me. I dropped to my knees. I was inconsolable, and she let me rest. She fed me, and then she drove me home the next day. The next day I get home, I get on the phone with my best friend who is a shaman, and I say, who do you know that can help me navigate the judicial system, the jail system, that system? And the gift of being able to ask for help, most of us are like, I got this, or I don't have this. That gift of stepping into, okay, I need to ask for help. I'm going to ask for help. Who am I going to call? That's a big shift that I find a lot of people need to make that will serve them at a much higher level. I'm a big believer in success leaves clues. And so I was on a journey on the front end to find people who had navigated the loving someone in substance use disorder, whether it was a spouse or a child or parent that had done it from a thriving place.
Right. Right.
And it took me, I don't know, 8 years until I found you and the only reason I found you was because I was doing the podcast and talking to people. And I talked to Rachel Graham and she connected me with you. And so that's how it works. Is if you're willing and open, you will find the people that you need in order to create whatever it is you're trying to create from an aspirational perspective. So success leaves clues. One of the fastest ways is to identify a model of success of what you want to create. Believe that there are always gifts and lessons embedded in it. You are only in control of yourself. Those are some fundamental beliefs.
These beliefs, these new beliefs are helping you to create this extraordinary project with huge ramifications. Could you talk about the project and how people can get involved if they'd like to?
Well, as you know, the project has kind of made some shifts, but the idea originally was I wasn't finding the resources that I knew I needed in order to thrive. And so it was about putting together resources. It was about putting together a membership. It was about writing the book. It was about getting on a TED stage because nobody has spoken yet as somebody who has loved someone and thrived in the midst of the substance use disorder. I think mamas are particularly powerful. And so as a mama voice, I wanted to give people hope that it was in fact possible. And so it's been kind of a compilation of things that I think eventually will find its way to people. And now we're, creating a partnership with you because I'm a resource person. So you've been doing this for 15 years. I don't have 15 years left to do all the things that you've done. And quite frankly, I think your program is fantastic. And so why would I do another one? My work in the world is what I'm doing right now with the podcast and the executive space, because the executive space is just full of CEOs and C-suite execs that are dealing with their own family crises, a lot of them around substance use disorder. And so then I can send them to you. So
we fabulous coaches that can help them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you and I talked about this. I have a master's degree in counseling. I don't counsel. I am great at what I do as a business coach and executive coach. And I refer people to counselors, but I vetted those counselors like I vetted your program. And so that's kind of how it's morphing at this point is as people come to me, I do what I can do, and then I refer them on.
And how do people find you?
Well, they can go to voicesincourage.com. That's our website. It has a lot of resources available on it. And then you get the book, the 5 Acts of Courage, which is available on Amazon. I think that's I did write it as almost a workbook for people to understand. It's very visual because I'm a visual person. So a lot of bright colors, but also images. And I think there's a clarity about it that would resonate with most people about what is most important.
And it's a quick read so that you can surface deep, and you don't have to spend years getting there.
Yes, that would be my point. And then if people wanted to, they could email me at kl@voicesincourage.com.
Beautiful. Well, KL, this has just been a wonderful conversation. I'd like to invite the people in the audience to come and join us in the panel. Joan's going to invite them, and I hope everybody will come along and let's have a conversation.
Absolutely.
Okay. Put on your videos, guys, so we can see you and see each other. And we have a lot of mama bears on tonight. Would anyone like to share or Rebecca?
Hi.
ask a question. Why don't you go first, Rebecca?
Thank you. I signed on late and tried to play catch up just by listening and putting it together. And still, I have 6 pages of notes. I couldn't get enough. I felt like I was in school in my favorite class. I just Thank you so much for your time.
Absolutely.
I was trying to write all of the slides down, and I just decided to jump on Amazon and order the book immediately. I just wait to get my hands on it.
That's great.
So it was just, I really am grateful to have had 40 minutes at least with you
Mhm.
and all of it. I love when you said success leaves clues, and it's fascinating. And it really does. If you just look for them and find the people and build
It's
that.
one of the quickest ways to get results is whatever aspiration you want to create for yourself in your life, find somebody who's done it and then ask them how they do it and just kind of interview them. And that's what I've done for years is I've identified people that were successful at what I wanted to create for myself. And then I just went and got a hold of them and learned from them.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Rebecca. Pam, Kelly, anybody want to jump in? Hi, Kelly.
Hi, I'll just say I did the same thing. I was on in the beginning, but probably within the first 5 minutes, I ordered the book.
Oh, great. That's awesome.
Yeah, because I have found since I have found the balm and the recommended readings, for me, that has been just hearing stories like yours that are so relatable to exactly what I'm going through, the emotions, the feelings, the processes, and same kind of thing, looking for the resources,
Right.
and just feeling so fortunate that that I'm finding these things and getting these recommendations, and I've just been pointed in different directions, and the progress, in just a few short months of just feeling like my life is back in control, even though I'm still dealing with active use. I feel like a human being again. And it's thanks to people like both of you that are doing these programs and putting it out there and making it relatable. So thank you.
Absolutely. Oh, and the thing I forgot to mention was we have a podcast. It's
How
called
can people get on your podcast?
Thrive While Loving an Addict. And Beverly's been on there twice. We have some really great guests on there some people that represent the correctional institutions and jails and also medical. I just interviewed for the second time an ER doc who I just adore, who is in California and at the forefront of leading the edge in terms of harm reduction. And so we've been doing it for 2.5 years. So just, kind of scroll through and see if there's something that speaks to you. I love doing it because I get to meet some extraordinary people that are changing lives. So just another
Do
thought.
they go, is there a certain podcast place or they go to your website? How do they find it?
Well, it's a website, but you can go to Apple, podcasts. You can go to Spotify.
Thrive While Loving an Addict.
We have quite a few people that come through iHeart also. So whatever works.
Okay, Pam. Hi, Pam. How are you?
I'm doing good. The thing that hit me was when she said, when you say you have a bad day, because I had a horrible day. And I'm like, when she was saying that, I'm like, well, I spent time with my sister tonight. That was wonderful. And I know, right? And I saw my mom and my husband came home tonight. He works nights and he's home tonight. So, I was like, yeah, you need to find the little victories during the day, the good things. It's not all bad. So
No, I mean,
just
I
your
literally
mind.
wake up in the morning and I'm like, oh, I took a breath. I'm alive.
Yeah.
I get to do this day.
Right.
No matter what it's going to look like, I still get to do this day. Oh my goodness, are you kidding me? So
I was so extreme because we did experience the death of a 30-year-old good family friend on Monday to alcohol. And so I'm walking that grieving trail with the mom and dad and getting, funeral arrangements and stuff today. And I sat, as I said, told my sister tears, and I said, today was so horrible. But guess what? My 2 boys are still alive and I have a job, and making money, even though it's not always fun. Why they call it work. So, I did do a little bit of that before I got on here. And then you just drove it home, girl.
well, the other thing too, Pam, that I want you to remember is the active service that you're providing for that family right now. You get to do that. You are gifted with sacred ground. And for me, there is nothing better. And so be in the sacred of this moment of what you get to do with them.
Thank you. It's a
Beautiful.
privilege.
And Suzanne, hi. Good to see you.
Buddy, really nice to see everyone. And oh my gosh, it was wonderful. Wonderful to hear the the session tonight. And kind of like you, I've got pages of notes. And there were many things that hit me. There was just so much hope in everything that you said. And it was just really like an inspiration. One of the things that really stuck out for me was when you said, what are the gifts and lessons embedded in some of the hardships that we go through? Because yes, and we learn this in the BALM, just feel your, feel your emotion, feel them and then let them go, feel them and let them go. And it's interesting because I never stopped to think, okay, well, what's come out of this for me? What is it? And I loved your example, like, your son getting arrested and falling to your knees, and then your spouse took care of you. And there was just something so beautiful about that moment. And it just makes me realize just how important it is to continue to make sure that we find those. It's the glass half full, not the glass half empty.
Yeah. And it's a practice of continuing to lean in that question. And it's just embedded in who I am at this point. I'll give you a dramatic example. A number of years ago, I was backpacking and I fell in the river and almost drowned. And when I got out of the water, first thing I thought that went through my head was, what are the gifts and lessons embedded in this experience for me? And I never saw it any other way other than gifts and lessons. My backpacking partner saw it a completely different way.
So what were they?
Oh my goodness. I went to such peace and calm that I actually draw on now consistently to be in that peace and calm every day. I'd never experienced that level of, think how I describe it. It's like breathing with the universe. There's just such a connectivity and peace and calm. And that was like almost instantaneous in the experience of it. I could have died. And I was very aware of that. And in that moment, I was at such peace that, I came up against it and now I know.
That's gorgeous. Thank you for sharing that. Inspiration.
I'm again, thank you. Thank you for the BALM. You know what? BALM is just so inspirational as well. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. So we have a couple more people who haven't shared. We don't want to force sharing, but we welcome you to share. We'd love to hear from you. If you want to share, you can just unmute yourself.
You could put a question in the
you can put a question
in the chat. I know there's something in the chat that showed up.
Oh, yeah. Could you please write your website and email in the chat? Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kelly, for asking that question.
There you go.
Sally, so good to see you.
Well, I'm going to join the party. I swear to God, I just joined about 15 minutes ago because I didn't see it. But I love all the excitement I'm hearing. I actually went and ordered the book.
Great. That's awesome.
I'll have to listen to the book or listen to your podcast, but it just sounds like you're generating a lot of excitement. So that's why I know you, Beverly, you were asking me to unmute. And I was like, I just got here 10 minutes.
Okay.
Who cares? Yes. Thank you so much. It sounds great.
Absolutely.
Sally Singh, you reminded me, we met last year at the 7 Steps Retreat, and another 7 Steps Retreat is coming up this year. It's coming up Martin Luther King weekend, and that will be Saturday, Sunday, Monday. And if you haven't ever done a 7 Steps Retreat and you want to experience being the peace, you take one challenge in your life all the way through the 7 steps in the course of a weekend. It's very powerful. Would anyone like to speak to their experience on a 7 Steps Retreat? Was it useful to you?
Is that the one that I did with you, Bev? I think that's, yeah, it was so great to have everything all in one limited amount of time. So you had a smaller group too. So it was very good. I would highly recommend it to anybody.
I would comment on that too. I've done a few of them. You were speaking earlier about just the power of finding a community that is shame-free. And so in addition to working through whatever your problem is at the time that you bring to the retreat, you're also building this community. That's how I met Suzanne. We've shared on a couple of retreats together and you just feel connected. And so it just gives you bigger wingspan. And so it's kind of has a domino effect in a positive way. When you attend these and dive deeply, you're also really connecting with people on a deeper level.
So true.
That's great.
And then at the end of February, 23rd, 4th, 5th, I believe, we'll have the next 12 Principles Retreat. And that's exciting as well. So keep it in mind. These are times to be together in community and deepen your understanding of the balm and everything it brings for us. It's a shift. It's a mind shift.
It's a heart shift.
Yes.
It's a spiritual shift. It's an all shift.
Yes. Okay. I do not see your,
I put it in the chat.
it's not showing up. I wonder why.
Oh, it went
I can
directly to
see it.
Kelly. I'm
I was
sorry.
gonna say, I can see it.
So now let's see. Can I copy? Yes. All right. I'll put it in the all.
Thank you. Because I'm sure some people would like to.
Yeah, I didn't even realize that was what was happening.
There we go. Voices.
Yay. Okay, great.
KL at Voices InCourage. Patty, did you want to share? We would love to hear from you.
Yes. All right. Thank you. I know I enjoyed all of it, all the comments. I'm started the balm, I guess now probably about a month, but I mean, it really is helping me
Right.
so much. It really is helping me so much. So everything that everybody, I mean, I totally agree with everything everyone has said. And I do find when I take my notes and I just go back and read through everything, it just reinforces. And so, it's helping a lot.
That's great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, everybody. And Joan, thank you for being here. Really appreciate you keeping us going through all of these talks.
Well, I just want to say thank you for having me.
Thank you. Always wonderful to get together for a conversation. We'll do it again.
Great. Awesome.
Okay, so everybody, I love you. I hope you have a magnificent holiday season, whether you're celebrating Christmas or Hanukkah. And remember, be a loving mirror. Thank you. Bye.